Hello, this is Panda Consulting's ArcGIS workshop, and I'm Frank Conkling. This time we're going to look at ArcGIS Pro and a couple of really sort of esoteric topics. First one we're going to look at is georeferencing. Then we're going to look at editing grids and inference. Before we start, a couple of reminders. One, if you look down the QR code down in the lower right corner of this screen, you'll see our QR code, which will get you to the Panda Consulting website, find out who we are, what we do, why we do it, how we do it, such. Please reach out. We'd love to help you with any sort of projects that you have going on. If you are here live, welcome. We're glad you're here. We really cherish and we love to have you here. There's a lot of interactivity that goes on afterwards. If you have any comments or questions or anything, go ahead and put them in the chat window. Chris is actually moderating, and he will go and make sure that I stop talking for a while and answer some of your questions. All right, so let's go ahead and start. So today's topics, like I said, is the ones that, because Panda is primarily a parcel mapping, we don't talk about a lot of these, and we don't use these as much as we probably should. And we just wanted to go over and review these a little bit more. The first is georeferencing. How do you go and take an image of any sort and bring it into your data set and make sure that it's referenced where it's supposed to be so that you can visually see it? And I'm going to go and do that. All right, so this is, of course, ArcGIS Pro. And I've got over here a scan image that came from some condo documents for this is a penthouse condominium. And I'm going to right click on it and say, add it to my data. All right. Immediately when I do that, because I don't know exactly where this thing should be placed, ArcMap is telling me that it's got unknown coordinate system. If I were to go and click on it and say zoom down to this, it's going to get me to some really strange coordinates that are not correct. It's not going to be anywhere near it's supposed to be. So we're going to look to see how do we go and make sure that it goes and gets put in place correctly. To give you just sort of some imagery and show you what we've got here, this is actually the condominium in which it's supposed to go and be placed. Now, one interesting thing about this is actually an ortho photograph, but it's not a true ortho. An ortho photograph that has all of the tilt taken out is a true orthographic photo. This one is sort of a quasi orthophoto. And so what we can see from this is that this initial image was taken out to sea somewhere. This came from probably one of their most easterly paths when you want to here. So there's a lot of slant that occurs on this as it's going up. This is about a 28 or 30 story high condominium. Be aware that where this scan actually should be placed is not necessarily on the top of the building, because the top of the building is skewed out because of the perspective of where the camera was when it took this photo. Instead, we're going to try and put it down at the base of the photo, which is where it is on the ground. So that's the first thing that's going to be a little bit weird. I've already gone and loaded that. And as I did, again, you saw it give you the warning about the coordinates. And the first question is, well, how do I get to georeferencing? Because I don't see it here at all on any of my tabs that I have across here. Where is it? Well, if you go to the imagery tab, on top of that, there is in fact a georeferencing. That's interesting thing about this is that georeferencing has its own set of controls and tools on here, so that when you click on georeferencing, it actually will go and introduce all of those new tools for you. The first one is if you've got an image. By the way, if you click off of that, that then is no longer available to you, but you want to make sure that you're there and you click on it. First thing you want to do is you want to go and click on the fit to display. What this will do is it will just take whatever image you've got and bring it in and make it fit into display. All right. And as we do this, we'll see it's now in the display. Well, first thing we see is that there's an issue here because we can't see through this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the raster tab and tell it that we want to make this maybe 50% transparent. And when we do that, now we can see through it enough that we can begin figuring out where it's supposed to go. So I'm going to go back to the georeferencing tab. So on the georeferencing tab, there's a couple of things in here. You can do some flips. You can do flips and rotates on here. For the most part, we don't try to do that. Instead, we try to pick out points on the image and find those corresponding points on the scan and try to find those corresponding points on the imagery or in our data set. If we're putting it into our data set, we want to make it fit somewhere. All right, so I wish that we could do a georeference. That's one of the new functions inside of ArcGIS Pro. When you've got sufficient corresponding components, it attempts to georeference it for you. Not going to work in this case. Same way with import control points. If we've established this beforehand, we could do it. Instead, we're going to tell it specifically, we're going to point and click and actually create our own control points. So on here, when we do this, what this is going to do is it's going to ask us, first go ahead and click on some point on that image, on that scan that you want to go and put this. And I'm going to turn this off for a minute so you can see. Here's where I clicked. And that was on the image. I'm going to take that corner. And now I'm going to go and I'm going to tell it that that corner on that image actually goes right here. And when I do that, what happens is, and I'm going to pull out because of the way this displays, it actually goes and moves the image and attempts to make it fit where I told it it's supposed to go. In this case, because we're rotating and scaling this, I need to put a couple more points in here. So I'm going to take this corner of the building and tell it I want to put it here at this point. And as I do that, you'll see it go and make that adjustment on the scan so we can see where it's supposed to go. Now on here, this corner, I'm going to tell it goes to about here. I'm going to recommend and tell you that one of the things that we find is that you want to have at least 3 points for your georeferencing. The more points you have, the better it's going to be. But with at least 3 points, it will begin to calculate what's called the RMS errors, root mean squares. It's actually doing a mathematical calculation to figure out how big are those differences between a point you clicked on the scan and the other, how much it has to rotate, how much it has to warp. And it's actually giving you that information up here on this little view, showing you what the transformation is, how many control points you have, and whether or not you've got any errors. Now, if I were to go in here and put a fourth one in, all right, like this, you start seeing, once I have 4, you start seeing sort of the residuals are in the RMS errors. All right, it's RMS is root mean square. It has to do with what is the smallest adjustment that has to happen in your image to make it fit within those control points that you've established. I'm going to go in here to my control point panel. I'm going to click on this. It's going to open up a table here. This was the 4th one that I created. I'm going to go ahead and just delete that one. All right. When I do that, it's going to go back. My RMS is going to be 0 because I only have 3 points on here. But I've gone and I've located it where I need it to be, as close as I need to be on this. If you've got, this is a square on a square, so it's a really easy geometry to go and try to figure out where it's supposed to be. If you've got a stranger geometry or more complex geometry, definitely make sure that you have enough and compare what the values are to make sure that it all fits correctly on here. As we go through this, if I wanted to reset it, I could completely go and tell it to reset all these links that I just created. Again, I already showed you, I can go in and show me where the actual control points are, those links that I create. I could delete them all. I could save them. I could export them if I wanted to or generate a report. I'm going to go and save this. All right. Now, saving it is interesting because it goes and creates something unique out there. I'm going to save it. I'm going to close this. When I close it, my symbology for those points disappears. And what I find is that that image now has actually another table that is telling ArcGIS Pro, where do I put this thing? And to demonstrate that, I'm going to go and remove that image from my data set. I'm going to go back over to my catalog and refresh this. Now, in catalog, it doesn't look that different because catalog is not showing us all of those small files. But if I go into here and actually look at this now, I find that, in fact, here is the image. Here's the JPEG image. Here's actually what's called a world file. It's a JPWX. This is a world file. A world file has the results of the transformation that occurred on my image. And every time you go and do georeferencing, it creates a world file for you. What does that world file show you? Let's go in here and look. This is what a world file looks like. Doesn't seem to be much in here. All right. And it turns out that there's a couple things you want to look at. The easiest way to explore that is to go to the help file. And Esri's got a really good discussion on georeferencing and what does a world file do. I see, Chris, we have a question. Can you apply a clip on the scanned image to hide the other? Yes, you can. You can, in fact, do that, but I would do that beforehand. But you can go ahead and do that on there. So getting back here, what's the world file? What is the world file contents? What is it actually showing in here? And it looks something like this, all right? Which sort of doesn't make a whole lot of sense to most people when you look at it because we're used to looking at just normal coordinates. But what this is really doing is, and we go down here, giving you some information about what's calculated x coordinates of the pixel on a map, calculate y coordinates, it's the header column of the pixel, the row number of the pixel in the image. So it's referencing the image pixel and then telling it how much it has to go and warp that. And as we go down further, there's a better discussion telling you what this information and how it uses it. And it's telling us what each of these fields are, each of these entries in this file are, and how that's used in a transformation. So it's telling us that this is actually the coefficient can be determined by each of these, and it's giving us all of these. Again, a great way to go and do it. If you have never gone and georeferenced an image, it's actually fairly easy, as I just showed you. Let's go and bring that image in again and see where it puts it. All right, so let's turn it on. And there it is. Notice when I brought it in, it lost all the setting as far as whether or not there was any transparency or anything on it, but it brought it in completely and exactly where I had told it. Took the image, used the world file to figure out where to place it, how much to rotate it, how much to scale it, how much to warp it, because it had gone through that entire transformation and then said, this is how we do it when we get that in. So when you're bringing an image in, make sure it has a world file. If it doesn't have a world file, you can create one, and then make sure that when it comes in, you can always go and visualize it where it's supposed to be. Doesn't have to be exact, but it can be close. So let's go back here to this, and we can go to raster and say, let's make this maybe 40% transparent, and we can see where that's supposed to be. That is georeferencing. Again, not a lot to it, not a lot of exciting things, but there are some important things you need to know when you're going in georeferencing again. All right, so get to georeferencing, we go to the image tab and then look at the georeferencing on here, and it will give us all that. I'm going to go and close this out. All right. All right, that's our first topic for the day. Let's look at the next topic. This is grids. This is something that they've introduced, and if you're a parcel mapper, you don't use this a lot, but it's really interesting what you can do with this. I'm going to turn off my world image behind there, and wrote that if I wanted to go and create now some features, and I wanted to have them skewed somehow inside of my data, and I wanted to make it easier for me to draw, one of the things that I can do is I can set it up so that there is a grid on here. And the grid is located down here on the actual, the bottom of my data frame. And on here, I can click on this and it will show me a grid. I'm going to turn this off just so we can see it because I've actually got this highlighted in. Let's change the color a little bit. So I go to my grid settings, and I can tell it what color I want that grid to be. All right, and I can tell it what display scales I want it to display at, how big I want the spacing between the grids. Maybe I want it to be 10 feet. Maybe I want it to be 1 foot. I can tell it sort of a common sense. This is how far I need it to be spaced, and whether I have major line intervals or not. In this case, this is actually reflective of one that I had done earlier. I'm going to go and just accept that, and you can see what this is like. I'm also going to tell it just reset my grid. There, it's a standard grid, true north. I've not made any changes to it. So let's go and change this one more thing here, and let's go and tell it that this grid, I want it to be 10 feet. I want it to be 10 feet here. All right. Now, if I want to go and have it rotate, let's give me something that gives me some relevance for when it's supposed to rotate. Now, on here, I can tell it this is an anchor. Let me go and anchor this grid here. All right. And now, as you can see, I can go and rotate this. As I go and rotate it, I can find something that I can click on and say, here's the rotation that I want on here. When I do that, it now gives me the ability to go and let's make sure here that I can have the rotation on here, but my snapping, I can actually tell it to snap to my grid. Let's go and try putting a couple of lines in. And when I get in here, I can say let's go ahead and create some lines. All right, and notice as I'm going through here, it is snapping to the grid intersection on here. So I might have, well, I have a distance that I want to go and map. In this case, let's do 50 feet just sort of to illustrate this. And as I come in here, I can actually see that it's going to go and snap to that 50 feet on here. That 50 feet, because I actually have 10-foot grid here, it happened to be 5 grids out here. It could be something different, whatever. I can then, again, it will snap to here as I'm going through. So there's a Again, I can go a distance of, let's say it's 2.5 feet here. I can then zoom in a little bit and I will go and snap to 2.5 feet on here. So I can follow that around as I go. I can also do things like, let's go parallel with, and it won't. I'm going to have to go perpendicular to this line here for a set distance. Let's go 12 feet here. So I can go and do that. Again, it will allow us to snap to grids. If we want to snap to something finer than 10, maybe we go and let's go and change this and see. Maybe we want to do a 2-foot grid in here. Go and go to grid setting, set it to a 2-foot grid, say okay, and make sure grid stay turned on. And now I see that I've got a smaller grid in here. Grid is good for mapping out sort of linear components that are relative to something other than the actual projection grid that you have built or the normal type of system you have. Parcel mappers were kind of used to bearings and relative bearings and things of that sort. As a matter of fact, I'm going to turn off this. As a matter of fact, I can go into my Traverse tool. And this is nice because it's built in here now. I go to Traverse and tell it I can start. Let's go make sure I'm the right ones here. Conjugate lines. Tell it to start here. And I can tell it to snap here. Let's start this off so at least gets recorded in here. 10 feet from my last point, and I want it to snap to the grid. I now have what the coordinate values are of that grid. I can now do things inside of COGO, such as we'll now go 90 degrees to the previous one for another 5 feet. All right. And so, again, as parcel mappers, we're used to using coordinate geometry, which is creating geometry relative to a coordinate base using kind of a grid, but we can define how that is. If I wanted to go, for example, 45-degree deflection, so 45 degrees from here deflecting over to the right, I would then go and put plus 45 degrees for 5 feet, and it would go and do that. And then I can go and do minus 45 degrees for 10 feet. So grids are helpful. Again, especially if it's something that is sort of non-reference to your normal location. But you can also, again, use COGO in the same way. So grids, helpful. As parcel mappers, I'm not sure if I'd ever really going to go and use that. But for the most part, it's good to just make sure it's there if I wanted to real quickly just digitize something out and be done with it. All right, that's grids. This next one, though, this is pretty esoteric. This is pretty hard. You know, there aren't a lot of people I know that's actually using it. Inference. Esri introduced this concept called inference a while ago. And what does inference do? By the way, let's go in and look at this. Look at inference. This is something that Esri did back in 2021. And it's a way for us to go and, without actually having to input COGO values, have it automatically begin showing us where 90 degrees, 45 degrees are, depending upon the tools. In order to go and do that, you want to go and make sure that your snapping agents are set to both edge and intersection on here, and that you're snapping to the sketch when you do that. Now, when you go through and you create a line, when you're done with that line, it actually starts showing you some inference lines. Inference lines giving you hints of where that might be. I'm going to turn off my grid and I'm going to turn on my inference. All right. I'm going to turn on my inference here. Make sure it's on. Okay, so now let's go and put another thing in here. Let's do 90 degrees for 10 foot. Now, when I go and let's make sure that everything is set up correctly. Here and here, my inference on here. Snapping tolerance. I want to go and create a line. And again, you make there's our inference. So when I create a line, and I know it's hard to see, it's a really, really light blue line that's telling me here's 90 degrees to our current course or bearing. And here's a straight extension out. Here is a radius on here, and I can tell it my last distance was 1637, but it will tell me how big that last difference is and let me go and edge to that again. So on here, I could real quickly go and do things like same thing I did before. I could do 5 feet and it will tell me where's 5 foot and there is my inference there. Tell me what's going on. I can also go and say, well, let's say I wanted to do 10 feet now. As I input that, it will tell me where 10 foot is. And since I have inference turned on, it will go and show me where is 90 degrees to my previous line, where is straight ahead from my previous line, and where is 90 degrees deflection to the right, deflection to the left, and 90 degrees out here. So these are little tools, little tips that help you to figure out where the next point's going to be. Give you, as Esri calls it, just sort of infer that you can analyze and say, that's where I want this thing to be on here. Let's look again at this. Again, we create a line. Here's our inference. It allows us to snap because we have our snapping set. Again, tells us how far out it is. And the intersection on here, we can go through here as we're creating tangent curves. It will allow us to go and have inference in, for example, 45-degree implementation on here, or whether we want it to go all the way around. So the grid tools and the inference tools are really not so much when you're using Coco as when you just sort of want to draw and create something on here, and it will help you go and draw it so it's a little bit more constrained than just freehand drawing on here. All right, by the way, here is just some more inference constraints, how they work on here. Just, again, good help system for it. So that's about all I wanted to show this time, but just above and beyond just the standard type of parcel mapping. How do you georeference a scan or an image? How do you go and use the grids? That might be a good tool for you to use sometimes if you're just drawing lines. And then how to use inference. I think inference especially is something that we don't look to very often, but might be very helpful for us. All right. So, question, do we have any questions in the chat window?
None at the moment.
Good. All right, then I'm going to go ahead and end this, and we'll look forward for you all coming back next time. Thanks.